Okay. And I don't know, since I'm not watching the other one, I don't know if there's more people that are going to trickle in or what, but
I'm watching it for you. I got that for you, buddy. I'll take care of it.
So this is about what I expected. I know that both because we have a lot of exciting youth programs, I knew that not everybody was going to necessarily dive in on this one, but also because the fact that I think people look at Rotaract and maybe it seems like more work than some other things. But what I was happy about is that this is a size of a group where we get to have some conversations, which is what I intended on. And I know I've talked to some of you about Rotaract at different levels at different times. So one of the things that I want is to figure out exactly what people hope to get from tonight. Is it just that, you need a refresher and you want a high level overview of Rotaract, what it is, how your clubs can benefit, why you think it's important that people join Rotaract or that you support that, or if it's more specific about what are the next functional steps we can take to make some progress toward either supporting or starting a new club in our area. So if anybody wants to speak up because they've got thoughts on that, or if you just want to drop it into the comment section, if you guys want to do that now. But I will, actually we'll just pause for that.
Well, I'd love to throw around the idea, if anybody on the call sees a place for a new Rotaract club to reach a segment of their community in a new way.
I think, the lacrosse area is obviously a logical option, considering we have 3 colleges here. And I don't know, maybe you guys can enlighten me on this. I feel like there used to be a Rotaract here years ago. I don't know what happened to that. That was pre my time, but in something I was reading lately, I was like, oh, there was a Rotaract. And I guess, too, maybe you can enlighten me how I've gone to a couple international conventions, and it seems to me that Rotaract in Europe is very it just operates differently or has a different type of structure per se than what we would anticipate or roll out here locally. And maybe I'm way off on that, but that's why I'm here tonight, to learn more.
I'll jot a couple of these things down here.
Tom, I love your idea. There's nothing wrong with starting with people that might want to serve along those lines. It's good to have a reason to exist. Oh, Judy, you don't have to stay muted.
Okay, Vic is watching the volleyball in the background. That's the noise you heard. So I'm gonna mute and I'll chat.
No.
In the chat window. He's gonna leave soon anyway to go watch the Padres Brewer game. So
I'm sure the Brewers have it in the bag anyway. That's fine. Okay, yeah. And so Tom's idea about getting a club and going maybe with Madison College to help out with the book project. How do we get that to happen? Marissa talking about possibly getting one in the lacrosse area, but jot down names of that. Choose for your phone. Yeah, and Judy, what are your goals for tonight?
Well, I want to find out a little bit more about, the whole Rotaract, spiel. I love John's idea, and he's in my club. But I also want to find out, so how does one transition, now that Rotaract clubs are considered Rotary clubs? What will they just, in fact, become their own Rotary club? Or will they transition to what I'll call the old-fashioned Rotary club? What happens with that? Is there a transition or not?
Yeah. And that's a really good question that I think has even come up more and more lately about as they're loosening some of the restrictions, where now is the line between Rotaract and Rotary? Where does it have to be? Where should it be? Yeah, that's a really good question. Cheryl, I don't think I've met you before. What club are you from?
You're muted.
We'll check in with Cheryl soon.
Brian,
I'm on it.
And I think there was a couple other names, not to put anybody on the spot. If you don't want to speak, you don't have to. But Joel, I don't recall if we've met before. What club are you from? We'll check in. So if you haven't announced anything yet, feel free to drop your club in the chat. I would love just to know a little bit more about who we're speaking with here, and sprinkle in some questions throughout the night if you'd like. But it sounds like we've got a good mix. People maybe know a little bit about Rotaract, just enough that they wanted to come, that they're interested in learning more, but still maybe good to have a recap about what Rotaract is. Hi, Joel. Yeah, still good to just have a recap of what Rotaract is. Is it just for university students? Is it for community members? Where does that line then happen between what is Rotaract and what is Rotary? And how do we make sure that we stay engaged with people, keep them connected, and usher them through that process so that they're regularly finding a club that's a good fit for them so that they can serve and that Rotary can serve them. And then, of course, we'll talk about, thanks, Joel. Good to see you from La Crescent. And then we can talk about, now that you're really excited and you love the idea of Rotaract, how do we get a club going? So first off, typically for a long time, I've said that Rotaract is very similar to Rotary, but it's geared toward people who are 18 to 29 years old. So what this means is that it's not just university students, even though clubs can be anchored within a university, but it's also communities and young professional groups. And I think that one of the things that we've seen over time is that the community groups that we have that are focused more just on young professionals across different areas have a great opportunity to thrive, both because of the fact that they have looser restrictions on who can join. So that means you're drawing from a greater pool of people, as well as the fact that by having a longer tenure within that club, you have a better ability to cycle through leadership while still having mentors there still in that club. So with universities, sometimes, if you have a past president who graduates and they move on right afterward, you don't have some of that legacy. But, strengths that university clubs have are still, you do have a captive audience. You have a lot of people who are typically eager during their university years to try to look for volunteer opportunities, growth and development opportunities, great ways to promote the club across campus, possibly get university funding. And again, kind of a different set of mentors that you can work with within that academic area, having campus advisors. Sometimes you're engaged with really awesome speakers on campus. You can have professors or staff that have done amazing things, or you're having those people come to campus anyway. So I think that there's different strengths to each of those clubs. But we should always keep our mind open and remember that Rotaract is not just Rotary at the university. Rotaract, though, can be found at the university and can really grow there well, but it's open to anybody who is 18 and older through their young professional years. Now, one of the changes that's happened in the past few years and made things a little more confusing for some is that Rotary and the Council on Legislation recently voted to say, you know what, that 29 age range, we're not going to hold to that anymore. We're going to allow clubs the autonomy to decide if they will have any age restrictions in their clubs. That means that a club may keep with it because it was already in their bylaws, and an existing club might say, we're still going to try to keep our focused demographic. We like serving that specific population of young professionals. We want people in their 20s, or maybe we're not going to adhere to the age limit, but you do have to be a university student. I think it's nice that clubs get to have that autonomy, that they can say, this is who we are and this is how we identify, because it's who we serve best. And I think that's important that they get to have some of that decision making. That said, I know that the question about, well, then when do people transition to Rotary? So if my club has put years into growing this Rotaract club, when does it become a feeder for us? And I think that's a tough one. Even when my first international convention was in 2010, I think, if that's when we were in Montreal. And I wasn't a Rotaract student officially, but I stayed in the dorms with a lot of the Rotaractors. And even then, I think this was after Ray Klainsmith, but it had been a hot topic for a while. How do we get younger people in Rotary? How do we get younger people in our clubs and shift that average age? I understand why they were going for it, but it did create some conflict. Rotary clubs didn't always want to support Rotaract clubs who they felt like were competition then. And Rotaract clubs felt like they wanted to partner with clubs, but they didn't want to lose their membership. I think that it's okay to have a balance in both. And there's areas that have multiple Rotary clubs, and lacrosse, I think you've had some awesome examples of this. But if we focus on growing the Rotary community and the partnership between our clubs, whether it's Rotary clubs themselves or Rotaract clubs and Rotary clubs, I think that we can increase the impact of Rotary overall. We can increase the visibility of Rotary. And if people go and they see a bunch of people wearing Rotary shirts at an event, they're not going to necessarily identify who's from what club. Not until they're engaged, they're excited by the diverse faces that they see, the different age ranges, and the awesome impact. And then they'll say, this is great. How do I join? And we can respond to them that we've got a number of options. And I think that, even in my community here in Madison, we don't yet have a community-based Rotary club, but we have people who have visited other clubs or talked to Rotarians and been referred to my club because we have a less common meeting time being on Sunday evenings. We meet virtually now. But we also have kind of an interesting mix of people in our group. And so I think that just having more opportunities for people to find the right place to plug in is where that good balance happens. Now, yes, Karen.
I thought you were going to, well, thanks for calling on me. I see Rotaract as a vehicle for growing diversity. So in the last two Shark Tanks, for Rotary After Hours, Bill and Marissa's clubs, you've touched a community, one with the Good Life Center. Is that right? Good something. And then the other one was just recently started, which has a mission that with Rotary. And as I sat and listened to Sky, who is beautiful, share, I thought, she's a Rotarian, and could we give them the gift of Rotary through Rotaract to establish in their own community a connection to our world and all the resources it has? Does anybody else see Rotaract as a way to plant a club with a lower, for younger people, but also a lower investment as a member in and around our communities to draw, and then purposefully draw them into Rotary over time?
Didn't have as much structure then. A club has to have a lot of structure, but that a Rotaract club would not have quite as much as what we think of in the old traditional Rotary clubs and their meetings. And
well, I'm a person who loves structure. I think it really gives a human and a human organization a lot of life and flow. So I would say that the club should have as much structure as it needs to get to be who they want to be. But I would say that for any Rotary club too.
It's interesting. A couple examples, and Betsy, this is right to your question. What are the dues expectations at the district and international levels? I think it's interesting because Karen said, I love structure. Karen feels supported by structure, while other people will feel restricted by it. And I think you find those limits when you run up against it. So a structure can be really freeing if it's supporting what you do. It can be limiting if you feel like you're up against it. A Rotaract club is, or to be honest, any new club, but Rotaract club specifically, it does overall have a little less structure. And by being new, it allows them to form their own structure that they feel supported by as opposed to limited by. So, for instance, Betsy asks what the dues expectations are. And in fact, for many years, there were no dues expectations. There was just the chartering fees. They're shifting this so that there is going to be a very minimal dues requirement soon. But typically, and I think it's about $10 a year, typically though, Rotaractors, I think when they set dues structures and other clubs I've looked at, perhaps the dues might be $50 a year. But that would end up going toward maybe some new member events that they have. Maybe it could go toward a donation to a project that they work with, some seed money for something, maybe media or materials that they need to help promote the club. The club, though, can really decide what they do with that. But typically $50 a year or $20 a semester or $25 a semester is much more consumable than any, the $250 to $1,000 a year that might immediately turn some people off, and they'd see that as a limiting factor. Beyond that, though, I think Rotary's already moved in the way of removing structure. So Rotary no longer has an attendance requirement, just like the Rotaract Club may not have. They want people to be engaged, but you don't have to be there every time. Some clubs still then say they have an attendance requirement, but a new Rotaract Club would decide that for themselves. Yeah, so that's, in terms of structure, I think that they are less structured. It's what gives them more freedom, but they still are going to have a framework to keep them heading in the right direction. It's just that by forming a new club, they get to decide that, and it's specific to them.
I assume they can go after district and global grants as well?
That's a great question. And yes, they can. Not only can they go for them themselves, but now they can be your partner, Judy. So if you found a motivated Rotaract club and you wanted them to partner in a grant, they could also raise their own funds and help contribute toward those matching grants that you get. So that's really exciting too.
Betsy, you asked about financially sponsored. A host club could definitely help with all of those things and literally host on your Zoom account. Our Rotaractors, this is weird, are not in Club Runner. They're members of Rotary, but right now they are out of Club Runner, which it really sends mixed messages. But I guess we're on our way with Rotaract. So we can forgive ourselves for being on our way.
It's developing. I mean, I'll also remind people that one of the opportunities that you're offering people with Rotaract is that we are changing as we go. Rotary is figuring out how to best support them with that structure that gives them opportunity without limiting them. But one of the things that we're doing is we're incorporating them into that standard, some of the standard expectations we have that are about building leadership skills and opportunities. So our President-elect training seminar, for instance, is now something that all of our Rotaract leaders are going to be attending. It's not something that we tell them about once they join Rotary. They get that same opportunity because we expect them to have that same impact on their community. So it's nice to see that equal investment.
So if they're not in Club Runner, which means they're not listed if I go out to the district site, how does a club get in touch with them? If they want to involve a Rotaract club in Madison to do a service project together, how does one contact, the Rotaract club in Madison?
Right now, I'll admit that I don't know the most streamlined way if that's how you would typically contact your other clubs, but we can network. If you reach out to me, or we have an assistant governor right now that's not regional based, but focused on supporting those types of clubs, those Rotaract clubs, we can work with you to make sure that you get connected with them. And we can support that conversation too with additional information or materials, maybe bolstering education for the Rotaract club as we need to, as we go, and possibly pointing you toward new things that we're hearing. As Rotaract is changing and as Rotary International is supporting Rotaract in new ways, there might be additional opportunities we can take advantage of. So we're really happy on the district Rotaract leadership page to help support those conversations.
So I don't know how to, okay, I'll play devil's advocate here, and I'm sure I'll make not friends by bringing up some of my concerns. So I apologize ahead of time. Here's some of my hesitations with Rotaract. And Justin, you talked about it earlier. So I'm in Rotary After Hours. Our target member, Bill tips the scale for us. That's okay. is that, 20, 30 year age group. And so if all of a sudden there's a Rotaract club and it's a fraction, and we try to keep our dues as low as we can. And I think with what's happened and transpired this last year of not having meeting dues and knowing that we need to innovate and find a new venue that possibly is cheaper or more, value for what we're paying, why would somebody join After Hours when they can go join a Rotaract club and it's cheaper? Yeah. And then my second point is I'm not against it, but I think you have to have a really strong conduit program, whatever that looks like, to bridge the gap of getting those Rotaractors into then say an After Hours or a La Crescent or Judy's Club, because otherwise then you're not creating a sustainability structure for your existing Rotary clubs.
So there's a lot there. But I can say that, Marissa, I feel like I can relate to you a lot because before we started the Madison After Hours Club, we went and visited yours. That was, the club that I'm a part of, we wanted to be like you. We thought that was a great model, and there's a lot that we took from that. So I can relate in that when we look at a Rotaract club or the ones that exist in the Madison area, where do we see them as partners and where do we see them as some competition? As we try to start more right now, and Tom wants to get another one off the ground here too. It's tough, and I think that your comment too about even supporting your clubs long term is a really interesting one. I try to step back and look at, from my own experience, my own opinion, that as long as Madison continues to have an active Rotary family, if it came and went in different clubs over different time, maybe nobody reaches that centennial milestone, but we always have an active and impactful Rotary group across Madison. I think when people reach out to our club, if it's our schedule doesn't work or our dues format doesn't work, or maybe something about our speakers, our programs, they're great for some people and not for others, I would want to make sure they have an opportunity that really feeds what they're looking for. I think that if our club isn't staying relevant and we're not attracting anyone, then our club needs to change. But if we're attracting someone and it's a different group, then we just want to present them with that opportunity. So for you saying that, I think you're that same age group, I can see that. And maybe it's a reason that for a while we'd focus on university-based clubs within the La Crosse area and see where that balance comes, how people can matriculate through those programs, what value that Rotaract is serving there that we think is different and is okay to be different from your Rotary clubs. But I would hope that there's a partnership, and like you mentioned, you give people something to aspire toward and move into those Rotary clubs as they recognize they can serve in a different way and be served in a different way, maybe as that target demographic changes. Karen?
Marissa, as you grow older, are you planning on leaving RA?
I'm not.
But what I'm asking is your club, so you're in that demographic now. And I'm in Rotary After Hours too, so I get it about Bill.
Bill.
I know you do, like crazy. You love
him. He's not the only one. I mean, we have.
Well, but my question is, you are that demographic now. Will you be that demographic in 20 years?
I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I just read a reflection my dad wrote 10 years ago as the club was chartering, and it said, I think they'll age with the club. But it's interesting because there's a gap in not having we're the young club in town, but our recent members that have joined, like the one that just joined, she's early 20s straight out of college.
Yeah.
So, and she's going to be great for our club. And
she brought a guest.
And she already brought a guest. And so, I mean, she literally just graduated. And so the majority of our newer members are quite young.
So that's why I think of in lacrosse as an effort from Ra, even that a club in a different demographic for people who would walk into your club and maybe not see themselves reflected there, but could have Rotary in their own culture, their own way, and maybe more affordably that for whom it would matter. I'm not trying to talk you into it, but I think, and Bill, you can definitely say this sense that a new club will weaken membership never comes true. It always strengthens, doesn't it? Always. And I'm in other organizations too. And nobody ever wants to take the energy to start a new club because they feel like it'll be a net negative. And it's never that. It's like building a family.
Yeah.
Bill, you're muted. I don't know.
It kept telling me, do I want to unmute? Because it kept thinking I was talking when it was Marissa. I couldn't go over the top of it. No, really good points, Marissa, and great answers, Karen and Justin. Really, it's something that Lacrosse After Hours has talked about. The club engaged 2 years ago in thinking, do they want to be that sponsor of a Rotaract club? And at that point in time, they were just not there yet. But that doesn't mean in a city like La Crosse, or I hear it so strongly out of Madison, that there isn't that culture where a group of clubs might be. Now, one of the things I learned from Justin this last year too, another more recent change, is that a club does not require a sponsor. I think that a sponsor makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's that link, but it's not required anymore. So a group can kind of find themselves in this thing versus feeling like they're some kind of a cross underneath somebody. So in an area like La Crosse or up north or Janesville, I mean, I think that you can see a lot of these areas where there could be that combination, to Justin's point, of the university-based and a community-based. I've been always so intrigued by the community-based idea. Maybe it's just because I've been involved, I've known about the college-based for so long. But the community-based of, if there's one thing we do know, is that passion for service is so strong, and to allow the groups of any size and any age to have access to the Rotary menu. I mean, it's just off the charts. But I'll go back to my facilitation role. Thank you.
Oh, is that your role?
my role is to watch the chat and help Justin.
So, okay. So it's not only the connection to Rotary, I can't remember the word you just used, it was a good one, but also that global Rotaract culture. That there's a big appetite for that, but we need to build bridges.
I will say that I enjoyed when my club was new. I enjoyed the fact that we seemed to be able, we were the first, or one of the first in a while that a new club showed up. And so people were more willing to partner with us because we were still establishing our identity. And so we could move a little bit more nimbly. And I think Rotaract could do that too, where they can support clubs and their projects while learning lessons to generate their own. And if we want to pivot now for a minute, taking a look at maybe, especially Marissa, how do you refocus it so it does have a different target? And to Karen's example there, where she's got some ideas, it sounds like Tom is maybe looking for an opportunity. I think that there are ways to form Rotaract clubs around specific efforts that can motivate people and both draw from that group as well as help support that group. But I always with a grain of salt. So one way that I've seen this in action really successful is actually new members in our club, my Rotary club. So there's a grant that we have that I think is from the district that where when you get a few new members together, they get $1,000 that they can put toward a project that they care most about. It's been awesome for our club to bring new people in and have them be engaged right away because they feel like they got to have a say. They got to do something that they were passionate about. I think that when you offer not just bringing people into your club and offering them maybe an opportunity to be club secretary or a program chair, but you give them their own club and they get to brand around something. I know this is another Rotary club, but the Rotary Club of Chippewa Valley After Hours is the best branded club I've known for a long time. other than, the brat stand. The brat stand is really cool that a club's got going on. There's some other clubs that are known for their projects, hugely impactful projects for tens of, or even more than tens of thousands of dollars. But what I understand is that if you're in the Chippewa Valley area and you want to serve and you say, I'm really interested in making sure that people get fed. That's what I want to do. I know people get referred to that club from outside Rotary. They know the work that they do in the community, and they've worked with that for a while. And they may have changed focus over time, but it was one thing that I always loved about them and was envious that I wanted my club to be able to brand better. When you start a new Rotaract club, we've found really successful clubs come from where a group of people get together and they decide what they're going to be about. And again, that's one of those things that hopefully it doesn't limit them, but it supports them by giving them focus. It can help them promote what they're about, and it can help them find more partnerships because of the fact that they're consistently trying to support those causes. In Madison right now, we do have a Rotaract club that we're trying to get started in partnership with the Goodman Community Center. Now, the Goodman Community Center, we don't expect this to be a club that only exists to volunteer and support the community center. But the community center and how it interacts with the community, I think in their local area, I think can be a more diverse club than some of the other clubs we have in the area. It does work with a large population in that 20-something range where it gives them an opportunity to serve within and without that local area. And it is going to present more opportunities for people to come in and help support the community center there. So I think that that's a good bi-directional partnership where they have programs where they want to build leadership skills within the groups that they serve. They can join Rotaract and find more opportunities for that. The Rotaract club that then exists in partnership with them and drives a lot of membership can at times give back to that community center so that they're better supported in their mission as well. So I think there's ways, and it sounded like Karen knew some examples or other people had them, where you can have something, or maybe like the book project, where you have students who are on a campus who are passionate about supporting a specific cause. They can organize around that. They can better educate themselves about those causes. They can figure out unique ways even to support that, whether it's packing the books, finding more opportunities for books to get those in, or more efficient ways of distributing those. There's a lot of ways that can be mutually beneficial.
Justin, I have a question. From your watching or working with successful Rotaract clubs around the world, or maybe in the United States, what is the more common things that the Rotaract clubs are looking for from their Rotary club partners? So if they are Rotaract, what are they looking for from a traditional, good old-fashioned American style club, so that we can do a better job of satisfying that need?
Yeah. I think there's a number of things, and I hope that the Rotary clubs would find it as benefiting them too, because Rotarians come into Rotary and often want to serve. And there's a number of people who love the opportunity to mentor in either direct or indirect ways, because it allows them to be deliberate about what they're doing, reflect on what skills they've gained over time. So I think that a lot of Rotaract clubs benefit the most first from some initial guidance. The Rotaract club can have an idea, they can want to go in a direction, and you can give them positive experience, past lessons learned, making sure that they can go through their development process a bit more efficiently. So maybe tips on how to start a fundraiser. They have a cause they want to support, and maybe it's ideas on how to support it, whether it's by generating money, educating them on Rotary programs, different things like the grants. I think that education is key. So the Rotaractors are going to have a ton of ideas. They know why they wanted to get involved. They know what they want to do. Now the trick is, how do they accomplish that? And I think that that guidance from Rotary is probably most key, both information on how to run some of those programs effectively, and then opportunities within Rotary that they might not otherwise be exposed to or educated about. Karen?
So Bill, we've gotten a little guidance from Rotary International, and that is to have a Rotaractor on every district team. And so one of my goals is to have a Rotaractor on most, so 51% of our committees, and I don't even know if we'll get there because we don't have that many Rotaractors, but I encourage Mike Dillis in his hybrid, project, and he, I think, has 3 Rotaractors. So that's been really, really great. And so that natural 8:15, thanks, Bill. That natural fellowship, shoulder to shoulder, and natural mentorship is one thing that we can give our Rotaractors, and we'll be really conscious about that. Hey, Marissa, I have a question for you, if I may, Justin. So when I think about our desire to grow Rotaract, and I think about the tension, this isn't the first time I've heard, so we're all still friends, no enemies, from Ra. I wonder, if you were in our shoes, how would you speak to Ra? Because there's a part of me that seriously wants to say, then let's just not do Rotaract in La Crosse. You know what I mean? Let's not, or maybe only because we don't want there to be any tension. But if you yourself saw that Rotaract was a vehicle to get you where you want to go, because I can imagine that for you. But if you can't imagine it for you, then forget it. So we don't want to cause any harm.
And I'm not sure I'm completely understanding. So when you say you, like you and Justin on creating a Rotaract club?
Let's say you were district governor-elect and you wanted to grow Rotaract, and one of your star clubs saw it as competition. What would you do?
I don't see it as competition.
Oh.
I think this area, as Bill dubs it, the secret sauce, is by far the least competitive area when it comes to Rotary. I think we help each other out. We support each other's projects. We encourage people to find the right club based on what their interests are, project-wise, what time of day it meets. So I think it's a very, very supportive area when it comes to Rotary. The concerns that I raise about Rotaract, it's not coming from a competition standpoint. So please don't take it that way. I'm just asking the questions of, okay, so you create this, how, if there's a overlapping demographic that we're all going for, how do you get them to the right club, whether it's Rotaract, whether it's after hours, and what is the avenue to be that conduit to get them into Rotary? It's easy to set up a club, but then if you don't create the sustainability channels to get them into the greater organization at the end, you're going to fail both Rotary clubs and Rotaractors. So I think having that avenue of connecting them when they're moving past Rotaract is really important. So I would challenge you, if the goal is to get one here or wherever, make sure you have that piece in play in order for it to be successful for everybody. Bill, you're muted.
Did it again. See, I couldn't get the darn thing off of it. No, I was just, what crossed my mind there real quick, Marissa and everybody else. I remember one of the first times I was literally floored out of my chair about Rotaract. I was at International Assembly in San Diego a couple of years ago, sitting next to a gentleman, a great young man from like Thailand. I can't remember, but Thailand, Taiwan, somewhere in Southeast Asia. And he looks at me and says, well, do you have Rotaract Club? I said, yes, we do. Proud, put that chest out. Yes, we do. And he said, well, how many do you have? I said, we have 2 clubs, 2. And it's fantastic. He goes, oh, well, how many Rotarians do you have, Rotaractors do you have? Now, here I was screwed because I wasn't quite sure, right? So I said, oh, I think we have about 50 or so. And he goes, oh, and I go, how about you? And he goes, well, we have 16,000 Rotaractors in my district. I went, oh my God, right? What I learned from that and from listening to others is in North America, we're figuring it out. And so Marissa, that's a lot of those questions, and every community is different, right? And so in our community, because we, lacrosse happened to take that big swing and go into a what we call the after hours model a different way, it just means that we got to figure out that other connection and fit. You're right, it's not competitive. It's just how you figure it out. Other parts of our district, it'll be different. The answer will be different there. But we'll figure it out, and it'll just, and working with, with the leadership of Justin and Karen and others, we'll kind of keep rolling that ball forward and get there. But Marissa, I celebrate you asking those questions and taking this forum to make sure you bring it out there. Justin he's got the hair to answer the question. He does a good job.
Okay, I have one follow-up question. So what percentage of Rotaractors go on to be Rotarians?
It's a good question that I don't have.
And then what do other areas do to get them in the door to Rotary when their time in Rotaract has passed them?
So I think it's interesting. I don't have an exact number for percentage of Rotaractors that become Rotarians. It's a good one for me to find out. In terms of, though, how people transition, you mentioned something before where you're like, if we don't get them to make the transition, we've failed Rotary. And I don't know if I see it that way. If people were staying engaged in Rotaract but not transitioning to Rotary, then I think it means that our clubs probably might have not been serving some of our community members. Rotary has tried to make this easier by saying that Rotaractors can now hold dual memberships. So they can live a little bit in both worlds if they want. And I know some people have said, well, why would they do that? Well, the Rotaractors that I've spoken with who have done that have said, because, I'm actively engaged in my Rotaract club, and I've started to become more and more engaged as I move on in my career to work with this Rotary club. And it no longer seemed fair that I would benefit so much from my interactions there and not be paying dues and supporting that work myself. So I think some people with those Rotary ideals recognize what's fair as they move forward and try to engage in that way. Like I mentioned before too, I think that by the time somebody maybe no longer feels like they look like the rest of a group, maybe they'll naturally make that transition. Maybe as their professional goals change and it's no longer about the active crowd that's going to go out and do a bunch of hands-on service on Saturday and then go out for beers in the afternoon, maybe that's when they decide they need to transfer because weekends for them are more family time. I think that people find a natural still having all of their needs met by a Rotaract club. They just have the option now that if the Rotaract club continues to welcome them, they can stay. I think it's best, though, that we keep them in the Rotary family, serving their communities and connected to the bigger picture, as opposed to just thinking about the transition. So, I didn't see the, oh yeah, Joel doing some math for us, talking about our target demographic there.
I'd like to hear from Joel. What are you thinking, Joel, and what brought you to Rotary this breakout?
I definitely like the idea of both RILA and Rotaract. I think, at least with La Crescent, we're definitely focused more on RILA, just because obviously a small town like La Crescent, 13% of 700 is not the same thing as 13% of 100,000. So,
website, rotary625.org. At the very bottom of the home.
So as a result, I like this concept of having somehow to get, especially college age. We have 3 universities here, 3 colleges, however you want to call them. That's a huge population that does move out quickly. Obviously they're not all going to stay in the La Crosse area. So, we are going to seed other groups no matter what we do, whether they go to, after hours or whether they go to, some other city. But I'm also, to say the least, part of the USGS's, the United States Geological Survey's diversity, inclusion, and, equity group. So, thinking about, the fact that most of these students, especially in the University of La Crosse, are paying their own way. They don't have their parental help. I mean, it's like 80-something% of the students there. So, I mean, if we can offer something that makes them at least think about what Rotary means and what we're trying to do without the sticker shock of when you see that first, membership due, even if we try to make it a little, lower and easier to handle. I mean, they don't have a lot of money that's free, but they might still have a lot of free time if they've stopped going to the bars.
Bill, you probably know, but I think part of the problem with the original Rotaract in La Crosse, I think I've got this right, is that the people that were advising tried to make it pan university, and it was too difficult. So I don't know, you might want to just, like, Viterbo might be the perfect place for Rotaract.
Yeah,
there was just let the other ones build individually.
Yeah, there was they tried to be embracing of all the colleges, Joel. They tried to hit all the colleges and charter at one spot, and then you became cross problem. The two universities had the issue, not Rotary didn't have the issue. And you have, again, one of the challenges that sometimes arrives. It's the same challenge that Interact has. Okay, the same challenge that Interact has happens in Rotaract in the university setting, is that you get graduations, and if you don't have a strong feeder program, you go boop and it falls off. It just so happened that they all graduated, and then two of them moved to after hours, and so you just had this kind of that thing that happened that way. But good point. And Justin, you were saying earlier, I have seen data. I don't know who asked the question, Marissa or whoever, about how many people move up. We don't, first of all, unfortunately, we don't have it for North America versus the world. At least I haven't seen it. I've seen a world number, but not a North American number. So it might be a little bit different. But it's the same thing of how many kids go from Interact and Rotaract and RILA and all the way up. It's an area that Rotary knows that we have this great opportunity to improve in that area. It's a pretty low number.
My dad told me a story once that should warm all of your hearts. He was a very strong Kiwanian and a Key Club advisor. And he said, you know what we do in Key Club? We make Rotarians. So who knows if it's true, but I thought that was hilarious. Hey, Marissa, are you still within earshot? Because I just wanted to say, that's okay. You can walk around.
Sorry, I'm trying to eat. I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I'm trying to
no
eat
problem.
dinner.
You can walk around.
Here. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, I just wanted to say one reason why in South America and Europe and Asia and India, Rotaract is really strong is because Rotary is still very traditional. Mm-hmm. You have to be about 40 to get in. And if you get into Rotaract, you're that much closer to Rotary. And so we don't have that. But since when have Americans worried about thinking differently about this? It's a tool to engage. And I'm just never going to stop thinking about diversity, that we can plant in a different community, maybe our Hmong community, just different communities where the discretionary income is much different, even than for young Rotarians. And I recognize, Marissa, that we're not talking competition, but when I think about, and it's always this way, looking from the outside in, when I think about somebody picking RA versus a Rotaract club somewhere in the La Crosse area, Coulee country, I think, who wouldn't want to join Marissa's club? Like, right? I pay 5 times for that. So who you are is what attracts, not your dues. It's never, ever, ever going to be about dues, even though people say that when they leave. It's never about the dues.
So we've had people not being able to join because of the cost. So I don't know if RI would consider making dues the same, because what isn't Rotaract like $5 $10 a year? So I mean, that's like $150 more than what ours is, and we have people that they're not making much, and we've had people not be able to join because of that cost.
You could have a Rotaract club that meets at the same time.
And that's actually, I mean, some Rotaract clubs, like I said, though, do have higher dues structures. If it was a young professional or community-based group, they might still charge $100 a year because it supports more programs, or they make sure that they've got a fund. My first Rotaract meeting in the US, they bought me a drink because they were a young professional downtown club, and part of their dues thing was every guest gets a free drink. So they do have things built in where that's part of where their money was going to bring new people in.
I mean, one thing that we've talked about in our strategic planning session and came out of the action planning was sponsoring. I think, Judy, you just said sponsoring students and some of those vulnerable students at Western, and getting them in and being that that mentorship and that leadership that might just spark them to you know, go further in life and create those connections, but actually sponsoring their seat in our club.
So I think I want to be respectful of people's time because 8:15 was our 45-minute point, but I'm happy to stick around for the next 10 minutes and answer more questions or just continue chatting. But I'm going to send my contact information right there is my email address. I'm sure it's easy to get it on the district page or to reach out afterward. But I think the key thing is that if this is interesting to you because you think it might serve your community or you think your club is uniquely positioned, that you'd be able to support this, if you're passionate about it because you think your club might directly benefit in a lot of ways, which I think there are a lot of ways that your club, even if not membership right away from this group, I think your club will grow in the impact that it has, the appeal that it has to other people. Let me know and let's have that conversation, because whether it's you're motivated to get around book packing on one campus or you want to talk about it in a different community where it's going to be more community based, I think that it's important to have an individual conversation to talk about who the partners in your community may be or, you know, on that campus, so that you can figure out where you can find interested students and young professionals, what that structure might look like to get some leaders involved so that there's a steering committee for the group, and how you can support them and offer that supportive structure without being restrictive structure as they move forward. I think an individual conversation helps with that, and I'm happy to make time for it. Whether you got 30 minutes or an hour, I'd love to have that conversation. So please let me know.
Thank you, Justin.
Okay. Any other questions for tonight from folks? And Tom, I think you might have dropped off, or if you're still, yeah, you might have dropped off when we did give a little shout out to the book idea about how that could, you know, as an example of how something could organize. But if you want to work with Madison College and you want to figure out what student groups there would be a good partner to support your project and other ones like it in the community and internationally, Tom, I would love to have a conversation with you just because it's been a while. So I hope we get to talk about that soon.
Thanks, Justin.
Good night,
Thanks, everybody.
Youth night.
Thanks, Justin.
It's a good time. Nice to get to meet some of you. Good to see you, Joel.
Good to see all of you. Yep.
Bye.
Bye.